The House of the Dead.
The House of the Dead series was one that is instantly recognisable to anyone who hung around the arcades in the 90s and the noughties. Tight light gun rail shooter action mixed with zombies, cool bosses and a case of bad but hilarious voice acting.
Dogs of the AMS. Time they made a move.
Plus it was a chance to show off your shooting skills to the whole arcade, even if it chewed through coins and made you look like a character from out of the Matrix. Kids and adults alike looked on as you slaughtered the undead in style while holding a plastic bright coloured gun. But let's move away from the arcade and onto a portable console of the time, the Game Boy Advance by Nintendo. Now this is around the time when loads of franchises tried their hands at the pinball genre. Mario, Pokemon, Pac-Man, and many more big hitters had pinball games on the GBA, transitioning away from their usual types of games and hoping it would be well received by gamers. The GBA just felt right for pinball games, the easy to pick up and playability of the genre just worked for portable gaming. Back to the House of the Dead series, Sega had already ported the arcade hits to multiple consoles that could use light guns, such as the Sega Saturn, the Sega Dreamcast, and the original Xbox. But there were two genres that didn't work on the GBA or really any small form portable, light guns and rail shooters. So Sega were tasked with finding a way of getting a House of the Dead game on the GBA, which bore Pinball of the Dead. The game released in 2002 in the US and Japan, then later on in Europe in 2003 exclusively for the GBA. Focusing on the first two arcade releases of House of the Dead, the game contains characters, music, sound effects and cutscenes from the original games that every arcade goer will remember. The aim of the game is the same as most pinball games, work through the 3 different tables and racking up some high scores to unlock new areas and also new ways of getting more score. Score can be increased by the usual means by bouncing off bumpers, placing the ball in specific areas, and also taking down zombies that walk and groan around the table with the ball. The main goal was to work your way through some of the memorable bosses from House of the Dead 2 and try and take them down with a pinball twist. Bosses even have similar mechanics and attacks compared to the main games. These can make the fight harder by making them harder to hit or by obscuring the ball. Some mechanics are slightly tweaked to fit in with the game's theme, such as a gun for the ball launcher and a chance of getting a mystery feature by timing the launch of the ball by hitting the reticule exactly at the moment that it will hit the zombie. This is known as a skill shot and is so satisfying to pull off correctly. Much like any game of pinball, be it on a real table or in video game form, the theme needs to carry and intrigue the player, pushing them to play more and more. This is something that Pinball of the Dead does really well. Flashy graphics and a variety of wacky and eye-attracting mechanics keep you glued to the game, trying harder and harder to achieve that high score. On its release it received mainly a positive reception from reviewers. Many writers praised its music and animation. What was obvious from the reviews was that some people just got on well with the pinball physics and others struggled, mentioning that the flippers didn't have enough power or that the ball didn't head in realistic directions. In summary, Pinball of the Dead goes back to a time when portable consoles were a lot less serious and shows that companies were more than willing to try and experiment with their IPs to see what other genres they could get to work, something that is rarely dared by developers today. With this in mind, the game is really successful. Pinball and House of the Dead are a couple that definitely go together, but no one thought they would. Pinball mechanics are sturdy and play as good as any other pinball games on the GBA. In fact, this is one of the best pinball games I've ever played, ever. The game's performance really shows what the GBA and developers were capable of at the time, with its 3D style graphics and some really slick animations. Also the time that went into the detail for this game to make sure it wasn't just your average pinball game with a House of the Dead theme, and more of an actual pinball game in its own right, was well spent. Although strictly speaking there are some small downsides to the game. Slowdown can sometimes occur for a short period of time while playing, especially if there's a lot going on at the screen at once. This is something you really do not want for a pinball game that requires precise timing. At first it can also be a little hard to understand what you do on each table, but this is mainly due to the flashy graphics which make the game look so great, but also a lack of indicators to show where the ball should actually go. Overall, Pinball of the Dead is more fun than it has any right to be, with it being a spin-off game whose main series is such a different genre. It can be a little challenging, but that's what keeps the game so replayable. Anyone who enjoys the cheesiness and the themes from the earlier House of the Dead games will get a huge nostalgia hit from playing and reminiscing on the bygone days of the arcade era. Even if you have no experience with the series in the past and are just a big fan of pinball games, I urge you to give this game a try. Thanks for watching this episode of Hidden Gems. Do you know of any hidden gems in the world of video games? Let us know in the comments below.